'em or sit 'em with Michael F. Florio. Go to NFL.com/startsit to see all the starts and sits that Florio does every single week. Week 9's on the way. He's been killing it, so just
thank you.
Yeah, go read the article.
The internet doesn't always agree.
No, well, the internet, you guys aren't the internet. You're watching TV, so you're on our side. We'll start with Sam Howell, who was the quarterback one last week, or are we starting him this week?
There is no way I could come out here this week and tell you to sit last week's QB1, especially with all the teams that are on bye. And yeah, last week he gave you 31 fantasy points. We love that. But he has topped 18 in 5 of his last 7, and in 3 of those, he scored over 21 fantasy points. So we know the upside is very high. Plus, the Patriots haven't forced a bunch of sacks or turnovers this year, and they've allowed the 5th most passing yards in the last month. So yeah, go ahead and get that QB1 into your lineup.
QB1 also sacked one time. One time.
That was the biggest.
That was it. They did lose the game because of that. But either way, still good for fantasy purposes. Eugene Cyril Smith playing in Baltimore against the Ravens. Are we starting Geno?
We are sitting Geno Smith this week. Look, I gave Geno a couple of chances the last couple of weeks in better matchups. Unfortunately, he's been held under 14 fantasy points in 4 straight. And this season, he has only topped 16 fantasy points once. That's after averaging 18 per game last season. And then, yeah, the Ravens. They allow the fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks and 6 passing touchdowns all year long.
All right, so a sit for Geno. Let's get one more quarterback. C.J. Stroud, there wasn't a lot in Carolina. Are we starting him in week 9?
I thought he'd have a better game last week, but I'm going back for more and doubling down this week on C.J. Stroud. I know he didn't live up to the expectations last week, but the Bucs have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game in the last month. On the year, they're allowing over 270 passing yards per game, and they struggle against rushing quarterbacks, have allowed the most touchdowns on the ground to quarterbacks. C.J. Stroud ran for one last week. We know he has that in his abilities. It's just a matter of if he is going to run or not, but either way, all the buys, he's a top 10 quarterback.
Fantastic rookie season for C.J. Stroud. That wraps up the quarterbacks. Let's get to some running backs. Joe Mixon looked good against the Niners. Starting Joe Mixon in week 9.
Yeah, we are starting Joe Mixon. And isn't it funny that when the team's starting quarterback gets healthy and looks like himself again, that everyone on the offense has a better game? It was his first time giving you over 20 fantasy points. He was below 15 in every game before that. Now he gets the Bills, who've allowed 4.8 yards per carry. They are top 4 in catches and receiving yards allowed to the position. In the last month, they've allowed the 5th most fantasy points. A lot of points are going to be scored, I think, in this one. You start Joe Mixon.
A lot of points. Let's get back to the Houston Texans, because we said last week, if Dameon Pierce didn't have a good fantasy game against the Carolina Panthers, it might just not happen. Is it going to happen against the Buccaneers?
No.
Okay.
I said last week, one more shot. It is one of the very best matchups for a running back. You know what he did? He gave you less than 5 fantasy points, was repeatedly stuffed at the goal line, and then pulled out to watch someone else score the rushing touchdown. Devin Singletary is splitting snaps and carries and taking the pass game work right now. Plus, the Bucs are in the bottom 10 in rushing yards allowed to running backs. It is a rough week, a rough year, a rough everything right now for Dameon Pierce.
I'm going to put some question marks there, because it's like, where it's at.
What happened?
We had Beck scoring touchdowns instead of Dameon Pierce. Darrell Henderson Jr. is like on the couch. He's chilling with us. Now he's back. He's fantasy viable again. Is he a start in week 9?
Yeah, he is. I picked up Henderson in a number of leagues, and I'm starting him in numerous of them this week just because of the buys and injuries and all of that, the state of running back. But he has been the lead back for the Rams in each of the games he has been there. Yeah, I know it's frustrating to see Royce Freeman split touches with him, and then he gets him down to the goal line. Freeman comes in and vultures it. But Henderson has been used more. He's used in the passing game, and the Packers allow over 100 rushing yards per game and a bunch of production through the air to running backs. And with Stafford banged up, you want to start.
Yeah, I imagine in 2029, we'll be starting Darrell Henderson for the Rams at some point. You want to see some more starts and sits? Again, go to NFL.com/startsit or NFL.com/Florio. See all of his work. We got starts from Joe Burrow and Dak, as well as Josh Jacobs with a new coaching staff, and Zach Moss. Sits for Gardner Minshew, Jordan Love, Miles Sanders, and Alexander Mattison. We got this one with Michael F. Florio. Go to NFL.com/startsit to see his work on the internets and other .coms and tablets and devices. But let's get into some of these wide receivers and tight ends. Josh Palmer, are we starting or sitting?
Are you in the business of playing receivers against Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed?
I am not. I'm out.
Me neither. I am sitting Joshua Palmer for that reason exactly. He runs over 2/3 of his routes out wide, which means he's going to see plenty of Sauce Gardner, which Marcus Grant killed it as for Halloween, and DJ Reed. Palmer's also dealing with a knee injury, which kind of left him a little bit limited last week and led to a down performance. Plus, the Jets have allowed the fewest yards, touchdowns, and by far the fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I would play it safe and get away.
All right, getting away from Josh Palmer, we've been getting 2 TVs to see the Colts play because every single game has been spectacular. Are we starting Josh Downs?
From one Josh to another, we are starting Josh Downs, especially because last I checked, Gardner Minshew is still the Colts quarterbacks, and in games with Gardner Minshew, he has averaged 16 fantasy points per game and top 13 in each of them. 16 points per game is around what Mike Evans and Brandon Ayuk have been giving you. You start those receivers every week. You should start Josh Downs, especially because the Panthers run zone 83% of the time. He is their most yards against zone coverage this season.
A lot of yards. He got in the end zone as well. And if we go back to this time last year, Christian Watson was like drop kicking people like Chuck Norris just from second story windows. Hasn't been good. Are we starting him this week?
Little Shawn Michaels super kick. I'm going to sit Christian Watson, unfortunately. It pains me to say it. It's not his fault. It's Jordan Love's fault, I would say. Half of his targets this season have been deemed uncatchable. He has yet to reach 12 fantasy points in a game. In the last 2 weeks, he's been held to under 7 fantasy points. He also has struggled against zone, or at least Love has struggled to get him the ball. 42 passer rating against zone coverage with 3 interceptions. They play a lot of zone this week. I would sit Christian Watson.
Yeah, it's been a struggle, especially in the first half this season for the Packers. Let's get to some tight ends. Dalton Kincaid, smash start?
Do you guys really even need to ask? We are starting Dalton Kincaid, not just because he's a Buffalo Bill, but because he's been awesome as of late. He gave you over 17 fantasy points last week. He's been the tight end 3 since week 6. He's heavily featured in the red zone and could be the number 2 target potentially for Josh Allen and the Bills. Now he gets the Bengals, who've allowed the most fantasy points per game to tight ends. This is going to be a lot like Sam Laporta was early in the year, where I'm going to keep saying it until it becomes too obvious and you start him every week.
This is an easy playoff preview game. Can't wait to see how Lou Anarumo and the Bengals go up against Dalton Kincaid and the Buffalo Bills. Taysom Hill made the starts. We did it, folks. We got Taysom back. Are we starting Taysom Hill?
He was a start last week. I'm rolling with him again. We are starting Taysom Hill. Why? Because he just scores fantasy points. Even with Jawan Johnson back last week, they split routes and targets at the tight end position, but then we see Taysom Hill throwing the ball. He's used running the ball a lot near the goal line. Over 16 fantasy points last week. He's given you over 12 in 3 straight, and it's a good matchup against the Colts, who allow a lot of production to tight ends. But again, he's a running back, a quarterback, a tight end, all kind of in one. Just one of the best players in football, and you get to put him at the weakest position.
Yeah, worst case scenario, he's running a lot of routes too. Even if they don't put him at quarterback, like they're targeting him. So target starts and sits as well. Again, go check them out, NFL.com/startsit. So you want more? We'll throw some more up here for you. Amari Cooper and Rashee Rice in Germany are starts. Logan Thomas as well. Gerald Everett, a sit for KJ Osborne as they figure out the quarterback situation. Michael Wilson, Luke Musgrave, and a sit for Tyler Higbee.